It's time. It is time for NRCS Partyline today, brought to you by Wimmer Opticians of St. Cloud and Chiropractic Connection of St. Joseph. My name is Brad Melchio. We're having fun already on the show. Can you tell? We have clouds and 63 degrees in studio with us. The Dirt Boys, I call them. I don't know if they like that terminology, but it's Dennis Fuchs from Soil and Water Conservation District and Chris Hogge, Natural Resources Conservation Service. Good morning, Chris and Dennis.
Good morning.
What, Dennis? What's been happening?
Well, we're driving out here, and it's one thing. It's just absolutely beautiful out there, driving through the Avon Hills and the fall colors. And then as we got closer to the radio station, we met a huge piece of farm equipment. And Chris and I said, you know what we should visit with the listeners about is farm safety. And I go, hey, you do that, Chris. That's something that you can handle.
Wow, that was not exactly the way the conversation went. I believe it was a joint effort, but he is right. We did pull up in front of or next to a big farm implement, and this is harvest season, folks, and the producers are running around with big farm equipment, discs, and
no-till drills
for cover crops. Yep. But please remember when you're out on the roads that these are large vehicles. They really can't see around them very well. So in a little car going really fast, you can get into their blind spot really quickly without them seeing you, and you could get in trouble, injured. So they are slow moving. So if you're driving 60, more than likely they're driving in the 30s or probably in the 30s. So that you're going to come up on them a lot faster than you imagine. So, yeah, just watch out for those.
Slow down, people.
Slow down around them so they can see you. Some of them have signals, some of them don't. So don't be passing when they're near the corners because they could be turning and you don't know it, turn right into you or drag equipment right into you. So please do be careful. It takes both sides to make sure everybody's safe out there in the field. So I know producers are taking all the precautions they can possibly take to not have that happen. But when you've got a speedy little car coming around that's small, I know my wife drives her Camaro, so when that comes around, you got to be able to see them. So do be careful out there on the roads and give them room when they're backing up. That's another time when they get really dangerous and they can't see people. So when you're backing stuff up in the farmstead, please be careful with little kids and people who aren't paying attention. So,
all right, Chris. The other thing that we talked about on the way out here, we'd like to just revisit with the listeners about how the NRCS is structured now. Listeners probably remember the days when Steve Salno was the district conservationist and he was the lead in the Stearns County office for NRCS. And it's not that right now. Chris covers multiple counties as team lead. And there is no district conservationist, so they kind of went to like a super DC model where Chris covers multiple counties. And Chris, maybe you just want to remind the listeners the counties that you cover and just a little bit about the structure of the NRCS and what we're trying to do to bring more support to the Stearns office.
Yeah, the USDA NRCS kind of went through a restructuring. They call it a 10-10 package, and basically what they did was they moved management to an individual overseeing multiple field offices. I personally am the team lead for the Waite Park customer service team, and that customer service team has 4 offices. One is in Stearns, of course. The other one is in Foley, Elk River, and Buffalo. So those are my offices that I oversee. I have excellent, awesome staff. If it wasn't for my great staff, I would probably be flailing at best. And so I appreciate each and every one of them. But the one thing that we're having an issue with is getting people to hired on. And we're looking for a lot of different positions across the state. We were able to bring on across the state. We were able to bring on like almost 50 people new over 2021 or 2020 and 2021. So that was a huge increase in our staff, but we still have a lot of room for more. And on my staff, we have the possibility for 2 soil cons, which would be folks who are interested in conservation and have an agronomic background. The thing that
soil con is a soil conservationist, not a con from con
right.
artists.
No, it's soil conservationist, and they do basically the same. They do help with cover crops, so kind of like on an agronomist level. So I offered a position for 4 staff this last go around, and all of them were ineligible due to soil. So one of the things that you have to watch if you're interested is if you have soils, you might be a shoe-in for the position. So that's one of them. So as we're talking about my team, I have kind of the restructuring part of it. They moved DCs and put them into SoilCon as planning type folks, and then they put like one over doing administrative, and they said that all I'll be doing is administrative. Well, that's not always the case because people leave. We have retirements, and we have people that go on details and that kind of stuff. So I do a lot of planning with my staff too. I throw in with everybody to get the work done. We have, again, excellent partners too to help with that. But as far as staff goes on my team, we're going to be looking for a GS11, which is kind of the higher end of the soil cons for Foley, and that position will be probably open to within agency and public to be filled by somebody who has an ag background also. So that position would be maybe a 911, but kind of like I said, on the higher end. They are responsible for doing a lot of planning and contractual type stuff. So that's kind of the openings that we have at presently looking for, and hopefully those positions will be advertised on usajobs.gov. So if you're looking for those, you can always Google usajobs.gov, and then the keyword for that would be, you can just type in NRCS, and that way you can get that information, and you'll see the job listings. You can do that and search those anytime. And if anybody has any questions, you can always give me a holler.
So Chris mentioned GS 9 or 11. That maybe doesn't mean much to a lot of folks out there if you don't work in the federal government. So GS 9 is about $57,000 a year.
Okay.
And we'll let Brad take it away here at break time.
We'll pick up where you left off there, Dennis and Chris, and we'll talk more about that here in the positions and go further with our conversation. 9:30 news time, Minnesota News Network, KASM Radio. All right, more Answers Partyline this morning, visiting with our guests today, Dennis Fuchs from the Soil and Water Conservation District, Chris Hogge from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Chris was talking about the job positions that are open under his, what do you call it? The team, you said team?
It would be the Waite Park Customer Service Team, and that covers 4 counties, or I'm sorry, 4 field offices. It would be Stearns, Foley, Buffalo, and Elk River, and that covers 6 counties: Stearns County, Benton County, Wright County, and then Elk River actually covers 3 counties on their own, and that would be Hennepin, Sherburne, and Anoka. And we are looking to fill positions. Again, go to usajobs.gov. You can search that on Google, and it will bring it right up for you. And you can basically just put in as a keyword search NRCS, and that will pull up the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and you can look for positions at that point.
Is this an experimental thing where you're not sure if you're going to continue kind of in this, I guess, format you want to call it, or?
This reorganization that the agency went through is something that we are going to move forward with. Okay. It's trying to move the administrative components of the job to a single individual to manage over multiple counties and allow the rest of the staff to kind of deal with the conservation stuff and work with producers. So it's supposed to increase efficiencies and limit the duplication, because there was a lot of times when you had 3 DC. Well, in this team, we would have had 4 DCs basically doing the same administration type stuff, where this is put under one, and then that opens those folks up to do more planning and working with producers. So it's been put in place in other states, so it's an idea that I think will work with the right folks and in the right places, and I think we've been very successful. We had a very successful year in 2021, even with COVID, and we've been working all year through COVID on a telework type platform, and I don't think we even had a bump in what we normally do. We had to do a little bit of modification of how we work with producers. A lot of it went more digital, but everything else we just basically just our office is all home, and basically everything was connected online. And we just kept right on planning. All of our software was online, and we could just go right to it, and we continued to work with producers. And if you needed to go out and talk with a producer, we would go out into the field and work with them rather than having them come into the office like it has been done in the past. So it's actually been quite a nice change. I've worked with staff, and we are 99% digital. We can even go out to the field and work conservation planning at their location with a hotspot. Each one of my staff have a cell phone, so they can just open up their cell phone, hook up to the hotspot on the cell phone, and they can actually do conservation planning right there. It's a little slower, but it can be done. So I think we're in a good place right now. So like I said, we're in a changing environment with the agency right now on how we're doing or how we're moving forward, but it's a great opportunity to get on. We had a direct hire opportunity with the agency last year. They're hoping to either get that extended or possibly get a new direct hire opportunity that comes from national, well above me. But they give us the option to hire folks that way. So we're looking to fill basically one soil con in Wright County, a soil con in Foley. We could have as many as 2 soil cons in Stearns, and possibly even an agronomist.
One of the things I've noticed, Chris, with this new structure is that you're spread out a lot more, and you're attending soil water conservation district board meetings in these several counties, and it just takes you away from being focused. So having these additional staff hired in Way Park and working in Stearns County exclusively is going to be beneficial to our farmers in the county.
Yeah, it'll be beneficial to the whole team to have people that can get the job done. And because right now we're down those staff on the team. So what I normally have, we're down, I think, 4 or 5 staff now, and it makes it really difficult for for the NRCS staff to keep up with the producers. And if it wasn't for our awesome partners,
that's us
at the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District and the other districts, and I'm not going to short them either. Benton Soil and Water, Sherburne Soil and Water, Anoka Soil and Water, Buffalo Soil and Water, Wright Soil and Water Conservation District, all the soil and water conservation districts. If it wasn't for those guys, we would be struggling hard. So I greatly appreciate everybody that's on the team. And I'm even going to throw in FSA on that, because if we couldn't get our job done without the FSA folks that support us and what we need. So yeah, that's kind of what the team does, and we try to provide the conservation that the producers need.
So we had some changes too in our office. What Nate Hilla, departing you as our project manager, oversaw the planning and implementation teams on our staff, and we're looking at restructuring again and having a planning team manager, which could be Mark Lefebvre if the board approves, and an implementation team manager, which could be Greg Berg if our board approves next week. And then what we'd be doing is hiring another entry-level conservation planner sometime next year. So we also will be looking for an additional staff person to help farmers, landowners do a variety of conservation practices on their farm. And we'll let you know, Brad, when that happens, so that your listeners can share that information with folks that are looking to be working at a conservation type of department like NRCS or the Soil Water Conservation District. So that's keep your ears tuned, and I hope your listeners know a little bit more about where we're at with staffing levels and the structure of NRCS.
Yeah, I would just like to send a note out to a lot of the agronomists, those students that just graduated from college and spent their summer internships as agronomists. If you have soils and you're interested in doing conservation with the Natural Resources Conservation Service or the Soil and Water Conservation District, please let us know, because that experience and your, I'm going to assume that they would have the soils background. That would make you, like I said, very eligible for those positions with that kind of a education.
All right, I'm going to shift gears here.
Go to it.
All right, well, I want to talk a little bit, Brad, if it's all right, about the Minnesota Groundwater Protection Rule. I'm sure the listeners have an idea or could guess what's the number one contaminant in our drinking water supply, in our groundwater supplies, in our private wells. And if you don't know, it's nitrate. That is the most common contaminant in our drinking water supply. And nitrate is from a variety of sources. It could be septic systems. It could be improper manure storage, improper fertilizer storage. Nitrate moves through the soil with water, and if it's not taken up by the crop, it's a necessary crop nutrient. But too much of it can move through the soil profile into our drinking water supply. The Environmental Protection Agency has set a safety standard of 10 part per million. So if it exceeds that, you have a potential to impact your health, especially folks that are 6 months or less in age. They can get blue baby syndrome, where they actually turn blue from the lack of oxygen in their blood because the nitrate is taking that, and it can result in death. So it's something that we've really been active with here in Stearns County because we do have a couple of communities with elevated nitrate levels, and that is Cold Spring and Melrose. But I want to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Groundwater Protection Rule. So the Groundwater Protection Rule minimizes potential sources of nitrate pollution to our groundwater resources. The rule restricts fall application of nitrogen fertilizer in areas that are sensitive to contamination. Also, it outlines steps to reduce the severity of the problem in areas where nitrate in public water supply wells is already elevated, like Cold Spring and Melrose. So the rule is actually two parts. Part one of the rule is focuses on restrictions to fall application of nitrogen fertilizer. So you cannot apply the fertilizer in an area that's sensitive, has sensitive groundwater features, or to an area that's protected around a public well, the drinking water supply management area. So those two areas you cannot apply fall fertilizer, which is also a best management practice. If you're applying fertilizer this time of the year, say you went out there and applied urea, that can get converted into the mobile form, the nitrate form of the fertilizer, and it'll move through the soil profile before your crop next spring and summer has a chance to take that up and use it as a plant growth, as the plant grows. The other part of the rule responds to the drinking water supply management areas that already have elevated levels of nitrate. So this would be like Cold Spring and Melrose, and that's where we have a goal to take action to reduce nitrate before it gets any worse. So those are below the drinking standard of 10 part per million, but they're approaching that level. So that it's a proactive way to stay on top of those increasing nitrate levels. And the rule is structured using a sliding scale of voluntary and regulatory actions that always starts on the voluntary action side. The Minnesota Department of Ag forms a local advisory team with input from the Soil Water Conservation District, and that includes farmers, agronomists, and other community members to review and advise the Minnesota Department of Agriculture on the appropriate practices or requirements to reduce nitrate in the drinking water supply management area. Now, for Cold Spring and Melrose, we have developed these local advisory teams, which include the exact people they've talked about here, farmers and agronomists and other interested folks. And we've met once now at Cold Spring and Melrose. And a couple of the things that the ideas that are being tossed around in order to get a better handle on where farmers are at with implementing the best management practices associated with nitrogen fertilizer, we should really work toward having them assessed and certified with the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. That's a program we've been active with for the last several years, and it's just a great program. Mark Lefebvre on our team and other staff, including Tessa, Kelly, and Megan, can do the assessment out on your farm and we take a look at your fertilizers, your pesticides, your tillage, your crop rotations on every field, and gather that information. And then we score you from 0 to 10. If you're 8.5 or higher, you get certified. That also protects you from future regulations, which also includes the Minnesota Groundwater Protection Rule. So once you become certified, you're protected from any, because you're doing what the state considers the best management practices to protect our groundwater and our surface water resources. So we have been working with our local advisory team, encouraging them, everybody in that drinking water supply management area, to become certified. Another thing that we're exploring is the use of perennials. One thing that we know for sure, in a row crop system, either corn on corn or corn and soybean rotation, we're going to see nitrates move through that soil profile. When I worked at the University of Minnesota Lamberton Experiment Station, we collected water samples from tile lines flowing under different cropping systems, corn, soybean, and then we had brome grass and alfalfa. And what we discovered was, under the row crops, we always had nitrate concentrations 20 to 40 part per million coming through the tile line. Under a brome grass, which was supposed at that time, back in the 80s, early 80s, that was supposed to simulate CRP, and alfalfa is just another dairy rotation that is another perennial crop. So under those two systems, what did we see for nitrates coming through the tile line? Basically zero. So we know for a fact that perennial cropping systems such as alfalfa or CRP, or now a new crop, Kernza, intermediate wheatgrass. Kernza is actually the grain product from intermediate wheatgrass. We're trying to get a few more acres of that in the Cold Spring area. So that's one of the crops that we're going to be encouraging farmers to try. We do have a few farmers already exploring this through a grant-funded project through the Environmental and Natural Resources Fund, approved by the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. And that's been a great project. And the Ag Utilization Research Institute, I call them AURI, they are also exploring more markets for that, Kernza. So if we could get a few more acres of these perennial crops like Kernza, alfalfa, or even CRP. I know we've got some farmers that have also participated in CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which is a combination of the CRP program and the Reinvest in Minnesota program, which is basically a permanent conservation easement on these lands to leave it in native grasses and forbs. So we're going to encourage folks in there to do that. We did receive another Legislative Citizen Commission Minnesota Resource, LCCMR, it's easier if I just say LCCMR, to have some more grasses planted in the area. And I'll be sharing additional information this winter, Brad. We're hoping to get 100 acres out there. We're going to provide an incentive to remove some of the risk in using and growing a new crop like Kernza. And as those markets develop, we're hoping that can take and stand on its own in the future. But right now, we're going to provide some incentive for farmers that move in that direction. So these local advisory teams are hopefully going to be developing ideas and strategies, alternative management strategies to reduce that nitrate over time in these areas that have elevated nitrates like Cold Spring and Melrose. So
Dennis, here, I'm a producer, and I don't really want to seed it all down to grass. I don't have any need for alfalfa. I don't have any need for brome grass. I don't have any need for CRP. I don't really want to do a normal easement through CREP. Are there any other options that I really want to help this whole nitrate issue? Is there anything else that I can do? I mean, is cover crops good enough? Is no-till something that I should be looking into? What kind of options are there available through the Stearns County Soil and Water for those kind of practices?
The number one, if you're in a row crop situation and you want to apply manure and fertilizers, well, you want to develop a nutrient management plan. You don't want to over-apply your fertilizers. And then, Chris, you brought up another great component that could potentially reduce the amount of nitrate moving into our groundwater supply, and that's cover crops. You get those planted this time of the year. And, Chris, what would it say? It's now October, what is today, 7th?
October 7th.
October 7th, and it's a nice day. I got time. I got all my crops off, and I'm not going to do any tillage this year. What should I be doing?
Probably, as far as cover crops go, about the only thing we have left and remaining that you can plant is probably rye. rye cover crop, and if you get that seeded down, if we don't get a freeze, it might do all right. But the one nice thing about cereal rye is that it will grow up in the spring. So you'll have a lot of folks, I shouldn't say a lot, there are a number of folks that are actually using the cereal rye as a forage. So they're doing rilage and they're able to feed that through animals. So it's a benefit for those folks who have animals. If you don't have animals and you still would like, or you would still like to do cover crops, or you're interested in that, you can always talk to a neighbor who does have animals, and they may be interested in harvesting that for some sort of food benefit. The other thing that you can get from cover crops is also you can protect the soil, which is number one, which is probably one of the priorities or one of the benefits of cover crop. The other thing is rye likes to have nitrogen, so it will the roots will go down into the soil and it will start to what they call mine the nitrogen that was remaining from the crop, which could be significant due to the drought. If you had really drought-affected crops, you may have some residual nitrogen still in your soil that, cover crop could pull up into their leaves, and when you knock them down in the spring, might actually become available for nitrogen for your next cash crop.
That's a great point, Chris. And so cover crops is definitely one of the alternative management tools that farmers can be using in these drinking water supply management areas and all across the county. I mean, we've got farmers that have been using cover crops and realizing that, wow, I can get an extra crop, basically. They harvest that forage like that Chris mentioned earlier, the rilage, and then follow that with a row crop right into the plant, directly into that stubble. And this year, it did struggle a little bit because it got dry, but then we got some rains here in August, especially in the Albany area, and those soybeans actually looked really good. And plus, you got all that forage off. So even if we would have had no rain and the soybeans would have died, you still had that forage crop before the drought. Otherwise, you would have ended up with nothing. But this time, you got the forage and the soybean crop. So every year is different, but as farmers are bringing these cover crops into their rotations and utilizing that for their livestock, we're learning a lot more, and farmers are willing to share that information. And we had our Soil Stewardship Field Day September 1st at Ben Mergen's farm. We had a farmer panel, and those farmers there were able to share that information. We had almost 100 people at that field day, Brad. It was just a fantastic day. But we had such a nice day, and there was rain in the forecast for the following day, Thursday. We had it on Wednesday. So we actually did lose a few farmers because they wanted to wrap up some field operations before that rain came in. And visiting with another farmer from between Farming and Albany, he said he's had 14 inches of rain since August 1st. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Now the fields are kind of muddy that they can't get the drought-stricken crop harvest. It's just farming. I love you farmers. I just don't know how you guys can do this year after year. It's just amazing. You guys rock on.
I just want to also mention with the cover crops and no-till, one thing that since we have had a drought and no one knows if it's going to come back in 2022 or not, it might be interesting to leave the stubble standing or plant a cover crop, because that will collect the snow and allow it to basically melt in the spring in your field, so it could replenish some of the water that you may have lost during the drought. So do keep that in mind when you're out there and thinking about whether you want to do tillage or not. The other reason why maybe no-till or a cover crop would be an option is if you don't till the ground, it doesn't open it up for evaporation. So that's another option that you can maybe hold off on any kind of fall tillage and maintain all the moisture you have in your soils right now, and just see how it works in the spring. And if we start predicting a drought, maybe just no-tilling into the crop stubble that's there might be your benefit, because you would be able to keep that soil kind of sealed a little bit so it won't evaporate. The water won't evaporate out of the soil profile.
All right. Final connections with you guys for what we've talked about today.
Well, just give cover crops an opportunity out there. We still got time, like Chris said. Cereal rye, winter rye, would be an awesome thing to still minimize the amount of tillage this fall. I've seen a lot less tillage. Occasionally, you still see a moldboard plowed field, but we're seeing a lot less of that. And minimize that soil disturbance. Try to keep that as green as possible. Like Chris said, come spring, that cereal rye starts greening up in March, and it's already starting to do its job of protecting our soil, our groundwater, and everything else under the soil there.
Yep. If you're a producer in Stearns or any of the Waite Park customer service team, or basically anywhere in Minnesota, it is going to be EQIP sign-up time here soon. So if you have practices, either erosion control or ag waste, give us a holler, and we'll be more than happy to help you out.
What's the website?
Just Google Stearns County,
Gotcha.
SWCD.
All right, Dennis.
Thanks, Brad.
Hey, thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Brad.
And Chris.
Happy Oktoberfest.
Woohoo! Eins, zwei, drei. Okay. Dennis Fuchs, Soil and Water Conservation District. Chris Hogge, NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. Minute past 10. We've got to news coming up.